意思？
Happy heresies and welcome to Aeon Bite. Welcome to the desert of the real. I am Miguel Connor, your Pompatus of Gnosis, your madman across the waters of creation. And as you could probably see by now, this is a special show by the intro and so forth. And usually with a special show, we have a double header, and that is indeed what we'll be having today. Why don't we deal with them Archons and their modern manifestations, the propaganda they use, the psyops, the suppression of human individuality, their vampire powers on the human race. Yes, this is there always should be focus on the Archons and what they're doing to us today, especially with their Karens and Catamites in the establishment. And obviously, sometimes it does feel like a black pill. Their powers are overwhelming. It seems almost hopeless. It's an endless labyrinth or octopus of iniquity from this wickedness in high places. But the show will also provide plenty of white pills so you can overcome the Archons and flow into the Aeons and find your higher self. For this Aeonic task, first we will have an interview with filmmaker and artist Sean Stone. He'll be discussing his electric but intense new documentary series, Best Kept Secret. Very intense, and I really enjoyed it. But again, with all the darkness, with all the black pills, there's plenty of white pills in Sean's message. Very inspirational at times. Following that, we will have an interview with my friend and past guest, Adrian Smith, on his book, A Prison for the Mind. The book parallels Sean's documentary series very well, and Adrian will take us down into Hades and upwards into the Pleroma. So I think you'll really find a lot of value in this double header, if you would. And the Archons certainly struck with both interviews. With Sean, there were scheduling Archons, there were tech Archons, there were constructing his house Archons, and you can hear it a little bit in our interview. And with Adrian, there were Archons, specifically with my tech. I upgraded to Windows 11. I really like it, but for some reason, getting my mic to work was very hard. But again, with Adrian and also Vance in the interview, we overcame. I hope you like this little background I've got. Again, as I say, variety is the spice of Gnosis, and I will continue bringing you that Hermetic and Gnostic content in varied and different forms for your benefit, and yes, hopefully to fool them Archons, because they're always present, but so is our Divine Light and Sophia. So I won't talk too much more. Let us to the interview. First we will have, or I will show you the trailer to Sean's documentary series, and then we'll just go right with Sean, and then we will go with Adrian. Keep in mind that it will be, Adrian's interview will be full for all subscribers. So please support this show as you should support Adrian and Sean's work. And beyond being very important, we must help those independent content creators that are making a difference today. So let us to the interview and let's get some red pills. Or as I like to say, let's put up some red pill suppositories.
You have all the money in the world you need. You have all the power you need. What's the point? What's the end goal? They said the end goal is to control the world.
These people out here who believe in this worldwide Satanist conspiracy, okay?
Ye fools and priests, I spit upon your fire.
came a pawn in a government scheme. His ultimate goal was mind control and to create the perfect spy.
Oh, you're talking about erasing people's memories.
The parents believe the boy is alive and has
just
been
6
kidnapped.
years old when she
I
died.
these people call me from all over the country telling me about the ceremony.
All of a sudden it becomes a satanic panic.
Breaking news. Governments are corrupt. They lie to their people, steal from their people, and occasionally kill them.
A new world order for ourselves and for future generations.
The Oliver Stone, George Bush connection. Oliver Stone.
Oh, yeah. He's their spokesman.
While I doubt my father worked for the CIA, as a Vietnam veteran, my father saw a deeper state behind the scenes. And that's where I want to go.
A politician has to be very concerned with where their donations are coming from.
Spreads out like a spider web to Washington, D.C. Involves some of the most respected and powerful and richest businessmen in this United States of America.
It was unbelievable what we had. Clinton, we had everything. What we had was unreal.
Procuring young girls for sex trafficking.
There was no indication to me.
It's over a $34 billion industry worldwide.
I was sold into a murderous pedophile network right around my 6th birthday. There were a number of aristocrats that were part of this club.
There are 200,000 children that end up in the sex trade every year. So it's the fastest growing criminal industry in the world.
Kinder.
A lot of things that I witnessed, secrets that you wish you didn't have to hold on to.
Hail Satan! Hail Satan!
If you don't get this right now, I swear to Lucifer.
Man, these cats speak with forked tongue. And you can see the lie written all over it.
And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
It is not crazy to assess news events to see if they're real or not real. And in fact, it's kind of crazy not to.
So what we see around us is actually an illusion. We're only looking at the tiniest sliver of what actually exists. We've been hoodwinked.
The greatest forms of human control is the suppression of the sense of the possible.
As Americans, we tend to believe this about other governments, but rarely, if ever, our own.
But you were staying at the house of a convicted sex offender.
It was a convenient place to stay.
We've allowed this to happen because we didn't know that there was another reality we could experience.
Welcome, everybody. We have the pleasure of being joined by Sean Stone, and we're going to discuss his excellent documentary series, Best Kept Secret. Sean, thank you very much for coming on the show.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Pleasure is all mine. So, briefly, tell us about the documentary and how it came about.
Well, it was a culmination, I would say, of years of doing programs like my Buzzsaw interview program. I'm watching the Hawks on RT, interviews there with people like Nick Bryant and Conchita Sarnoff regarding like human trafficking and the Franklin scandal, MK Ultra stories like this. And then on Buzzsaw, again, we had interviews with so many interesting people over the years, like my gosh, countless, but David Icke and Daniel Estulin and so many more. It's like I forget like how many great characters we have in our documentary, great interviews. So overall, we basically took what had been done, added some new interviews with Kathy O'Brien and G. Edward Griffin and people like this, and basically give an overall perspective to what I consider is the great conspiracy of our reality, which is who controls your reality, who's manipulating your mind, who's basically feeding upon your energy, ultimately your energy, but it starts on the level of physical slavery, mental slavery, debt slavery, right? Financial slavery. So all these systems that are in place, and then coming to understand the culmination of it is a fundamental matrix of energy feeding, energy drainage.
And yeah, it's an incredible journey. I love the series, the 6-part series, and it makes sense. I mean, people. I was thinking the other day, people want to say, "Well, what's this conspiracy stuff?" And I think it was James Corbett who said, "A conspiracy is just history plus time. There's never the official narrative is never the truth. There's always so much going on there, and there are perfect examples like." People said, "Oh, well, this stuff about trafficking in high places." Well, Jeffrey Epstein is kind of the martyr for the conspiracy theory world. He showed us that this stuff is going on in very high places, very powerful people, women and girls are being trafficked. Same with the UFOs. People said, "Oh, UFO people are all kooky, this and that." Oh, the government is now starting to admit the truth. So do you feel the same way, that you're going to be in some way vindicated, but at least you're sort of shedding a light, like this is not the official narrative is never right?
Well, I've known that since I was 7 years old with JFK, the film JFK. That really was one of the first conspiracy theory films. I guess not so much it goes back to you could say like the 70s. They started opening it up with there was a conspiracy obviously around the Watergate. Now, whether or not, I think the Watergate story is much deeper and more intricate than just what the public believes, as far as even, Bernstein, Woodward, especially his relationships to naval intelligence and who Deep Throat really was. And, the idea that basically there was this coup that took place against Nixon, who obviously was an imperfect person, but in many ways kind of like a Trump, I would say more of a Trump character, ultimately more of a nationalist than a lot of these globalists that we're now confronting. So I think that what we're seeing is, again, conspiracies are ideas. They're basically an intention to, you could say to commit a crime, but fundamentally it's about directing and influencing events, right? And ideas are the most powerful means of doing this. So when I studied my New World Order, which for my thesis, which became my book, New World Order, I was studying the New World Order as an idea that began with the end of the British Empire and was very much about consolidation of government into this, again, what we call world government, right? Into these structures that are transnational, empowering multinational corporations, empowering supranational organizations like, be it the WHO or the United Nations or the World Bank or the IMF or any of these structures that essentially are designed to take the impetus, take the power, just as the British Empire had done, away from the citizen at the most basic level of what the United States guarantees to its people, right? That the power basically is vested with you, the people, and you give the government its rights. And this whole New World Order is the exact opposite. No, we, the superstructure, give you, the citizen, the rights. We tell you what to do. We tell you what to put into your body. We tell you, how you must go to school and educate yourself and what you must read and how you must learn and what you must believe and all these, right? All these agendas that we see now at work. And I think this is why it's so interesting to be alive at this time, as that, as you said, we're being vindicated by not just us, but the people that came before us, the ones who were, basically since the days of the original New World Order, coming in like the 30s and 40s and the one world government, they were saying, look at this thing. This is one world government. Even Republicans like the Tafts and others, who are opposed to the League of Nations or the UN under the idea of, hey, don't cede your power so far from home. Don't empower these bodies. And again, there's arguments that to say like, yes, there's positive components to what the UN ideologically could be. But as far as the abuses that we've seen, as far as the organizational corruption that we've seen within the UN, I mean, you can't excuse how nefarious it has been. And again, there are good people, I think, within it. There are good people that have tried to do things with it. But overall, it's like power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So the more you take this power into a few hands and away from the common person, away from the community, away from the local level, the easier it is to corrupt it.
Oh yeah, and I don't see that as any sort of conspiracy. I mean, if you study history from the ancient times, as soon as we had civilization, we needed slavery. We needed control. go back to the priest and the king who would come with these scams to keep all the sacrificial meat to themselves. I mean, this is just logical. Those in power want more power and they want more control. So this is just human nature and a reaction to civilization, wouldn't you say? It's nothing woo-woo. If I was in power, of course I would do these things.
Well, we say human nature. I would say it's not that it's human nature. I think this is what's so interesting. It's reptilian brain nature. And I think we're coming to really understand this more and more, like this notion of the reptilian brain and how much this is what drives the psychopathic behaviors. This is what drives the trauma-based and trauma, basically the trauma-based behavior that's about controlling its environment and controlling others and trying to control as much as possible because it's all rooted in fear. It's scarcity. And most of our modalities of economics are what? They're scarcity models. You name it, from diamonds and oil and gold to, the minerals, lithium, all these things that we're using with, these rare earth minerals. It's all based in scarcity. And yet human nature is loving, I believe. I believe human nature to be that of the child, right? And most children they're curious, they're open, they're loving, they're discerning, but they're more heart-based. So I believe human nature is heart-based. But what happens is that what I believe sociopaths essentially have created systems of indoctrination, beginning with the school systems and, again, just getting the kid away from like a healthy communal conception of a home life, which again, a lot of our home lives are traumatized. We've seen it throughout history. The men have served in military, oftentimes gone to wars, been traumatized, turn around, traumatize their children. Mothers or women are sexually abused or you name it, either at a young age or at some point in their lives, oftentimes traumatized in their own ways, emotionally and sexually, and then take it on the children. So you end up with parents traumatized parents traumatizing their kids, communities, essentially schools and things like this, traumatizing the children into obedience training, essentially, which is what it is. You must be here at this time. If you're late, you get reprimanded. If you don't get a good grade, you're reprimanded. All these things, it's like psychologically traumatizing children. So that's not heart-based. So I think we're very far from human nature at this point.
Well said. Best thing I ever do was homeschool my kids. And as Pink Floyd sang in Welcome to the Machine, what did you dream? It's all right. We told you what to dream. I think that's the whole idea. And I love your series is so intense, and it's just this labyrinth of iniquity and power controls from all these groups. But as you said, you dedicate this to the children. You want children more than anything to be free. And of course, as I've said, in ancient times, I'm sorry, but in so many cultures, they sacrificed children because I believe they were closer to the source. They were closer to the great consciousness, Moloch. And it worked to create these empires. And of course, that's not going to change, whether you think Moloch is an egregore, an archetype, a real god, a marketing symbol. This stuff works. And so it makes sense this stuff works today. And as you say, the children are the one who are vastly being hurt in this world.
Yes. So what was the question though?
Yeah, the question is, it was kind of like a, yeah, exactly. You go on a tangent. That it's great that your thesis or your theme is we need to do more to protect the children. There are huge, you see it in the newspaper, there's huge networks of child abuse, child trafficking, and it's going right now as we speak.
Well, and those are extremes. My emphasis is always, look, those are extreme cases. But look at the basic level of how we treat our children, just in daily life. Right. And as I just mentioned, the way that parents traumatize their children because the parent themselves is traumatized at some level. Right. And living with expectations of this is how you're supposed to behave. This is what you must do. Don't feel, just, be in your head, go to school and just, so basically I don't have to take the time to deal with homeschooling. Right. Or be it, you name it, all these fears that essentially are driving parents to how they interact with their children, interface with their children. From my experience, it was a lot of, I was always curious at how parents couldn't realize that it's like what the natives talk about with 7 generations, right? So it's like 7 generations back, 7 generations forward. So with a child, you're basically, you want to tune in to like, what are your dreams? What are you seeing? You know, I love when I hear about parents who who realize how tapped in their children are, and they honor that, you know, as opposed to the, you know, the idea of like parents saying, oh, you're having an invisible friend, you know, get over that, grow up, right? That's your imagination. You can't do that. All these things that are told, you know, just to dilute and to kill the imaginative dreamer inside the child, because oftentimes it provokes the parent. You know, I think a lot of parents can be triggered by the innocence, the purity, the love of a child. It's like, no, that's not possible. We're in a matrix. You have to conform. You know, focus on the money. Focus on career. Focus on this, and so they dilute this energy, or they prey upon it. Right? I mean, a lot of parents, and again, it's not just sexual. It's just there's energetic feeding. There's emotional incest. There's all kinds of things that go on. So what's interesting is that these it's all reflected in different manners. So like, yes, we are growing an awareness of child abuse and trafficking, but child abuse and trafficking doesn't just happen out there. It doesn't just happen at the mafia level, at the elite level. You know, it's like, it's happening in every town, in every city. It's like, how do we actually relate to the children? Do we see them as the future and honor their visions, knowing that their visions are what they're gonna have to follow when we're gone, right? If we can have that love for the children, then I think it will change the dynamic. And if, you know, how we connect to children is how we relate to our inner child, fundamentally.
Really?
It's all what it's about. You know, it's all what.
Yeah, really well said. Yeah, like you said, their goal is to take the human out of the natural world, make them thoughtless slaves. That's it, complete control. And I wanted to share with you this screen here. Where is it? And let me know your thoughts, because you always want to know, how do these people become psychopaths? For example, one of your guests is Mark Passio, and I love his ideas of they found a way to become God, and the power and the addiction. So that's what he calls satanic. And there's this quote by Philip K. Dick, and let me know your thoughts on this. There is it right here. It goes, this is from Men in the High Castle, from his book and the series. They want to be the agents, not the victims of history. They identify with God's power and believe they are godlike. That is their basic madness. They are overcome by some archetype. Their egos have expanded psychotically so that they cannot tell where they begin and the Godhead leaves off. It is not hubris, not pride. It is the inflation of the ego to its ultimate confusion between him who worships and that which is worshipped. Man has not eaten God. God has eaten man. What do you think about that quote?
Well, it reminds me of a lot of people in power, celebrities. You know, I have some experience with being around people that are celebrated, you know, worshipped as famous, and it's very interesting because how do you separate yourself from that kind of worship? And it's also, upon us. I mean, let's be honest. It's a lot of humans that have surrendered their power to these, you know, to these stars, right? Get a political star, you know, whatever, you know, even a doctor, you know, even a scientist. It's like, you know, it's how amazing. I mean, you know, even when they were, you know, the celebrities were fawning over Fauci, right? I mean, it's like all this notion of just how much people are in awe of someone. And it's like, I don't know. I've never had that experience. I mean, because I've met so many since I was a child, and I just always see the human, and I'm just like, how can people be so like gaga and like starry-eyed? It's just like, this is not a star on, you know, this is not a star from the heaven. Actually, the irony is that each of us is our star seeds. We are the stars from the heaven on earth, but we don't look at ourselves with that awe and appreciation. As a result, we're looking out there for like, wow, you know, it's celebrity sighting, right? You know, these people that have surrendered their energy to these systems, these structures, like they are literally worshiping that ego, that monster that is ego, right? And it's like the modern forms of Moloch and Belial and Baal and all those, demons of the old time, right? It's like they're just here now in the new forms, politicians and doctor, and celebrity, and all these things, right? It's like, rock stars, rap stars, take my energy here, I used to say it like, you go into a rock concert and you're just like, all that energy is pouring out to the artist, right?
Yeah.
And, it's just like, it's a mass feeding ground. If you think about it for, energetic levels, it's a lot of, mass feeding can go on. And then you end up with situations like people being killed at the Scott concert last year. And that it was like, I heard that the Astroworld, like I heard that one of the ladies organizing it was like the woman that was like managing Britney Spears's, remember when she was under, what is that word? I can't remember.
Yeah, I forgot she's under, there's a legal term. She's not in control of her finances and all that.
Exactly. A custodianship, I think, right? Like a custodianship.
Yeah, right.
And I'm like, well, that's basically the way they want all of us to be, is such that, we don't have sovereignty over our being, the I am that we are. They want us to be like in total, that slavery. We don't know the laws. We're operating on maritime systems of law. We don't own the land. We're just, we're paying rent, we're paying taxes. We're just basically all, we're just beholden to this monster. And that's the way that they feed on it. Again, it's reptilian brain, it's ego. And there's a healthy side to ego. The healthy side of ego is what each of us has when we say, hey, I am the star. I am the star on earth, right? That's me acknowledging the quality of, of my soul and wanting to basically bring more light and love to the planet. Like we're all expressions of an ego in the sense of I am my, my being, my body, my soul. As long as it's not about feeding upon others, like I would say that's the dark side of the ego, right? It's like feeding upon others, as opposed to the natural way. The natural order is reciprocity. It's exchange, right? It's yin yang. It's like give and take. So there's light in the dark and there's dark in the light. And we understand it. Nothing is perfect, right? It gets messy, but there's a natural order and cycle to things. And if we're exchanging properly, we would have a much better system than we have now, which is a lot of, just think about like the model of we talked about, like all this energy feeding. Well, how do we know that's what's happening? Because a handful of people have as much wealth as like half of the planet. 1%, less than 1% of America has more wealth than the entire middle class of America. That's how you know that what we're saying energetically is happening, because everything manifests is reflected, right, in the physical realm. So it's like it happens energetically, it's going to manifest physically. All this energy feeding has literally depleted the economy of the working class, now the middle class. And if America's middle class is depleted like this, what does that tell you about the rest of the planet?
Yeah, it's pretty grim. And it's amazing. You did grow up in Hollywood. Obviously, your father was always, again, sort of the kind of individual looking at the edges, trying to raise the veil. Was your red pilling sort of gradual? Was there ever a time? I mean, you talk about going to Tibet and when you were 12, JFK, or was there ever a one instance where you said, oh my God, like, for example, me, I was always into conspiracy, but I think when I read Harold Quigley's Tragedy and Hope, that's when I went, oh my God, this is really happening at the highest levels, like a giant, because this is a scholar who breaks it down and you're like, this is worse than I could have ever imagined. How about you?
Yeah, no, Quigley's book was helpful for my New World Order thesis work.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it wasn't so much about a red pill. I mean, I was 7 when I was part of JFK and became cognizant, I would say, it's like, cause they say like 7, 8 is the age of reason. So it's interesting how, I was I 6, 7? I guess, no, I was 6. And then I just turned 7 when I watched the film. So it was like 6 to 7 kind of thing. But yeah, basically it was about, no, it was 7 to 8. So it's like the age of reason was hitting. And there was like the age of reason was realizing in a way that, because before then I'd been in just a lot of dreamscapes. You know, it's like when you're young, when you're really, you know, you're under 7 years old, like life feels just like a lot of dreamscapes, right? You don't really have a continuity so much to life. It's like little sparkles of awareness, and for the most part, it's you know, it's the, you know, getting accustomed to this world, all right, and to like the weird, you know, the patterns of living wherein I was between school or off on a movie set somewhere, and you know, hanging out with friends, all these different aspects of life that I was getting familiar with. So I wasn't thinking too much about larger power structures. I was aware of war at that point. I'd already been on film sets like Platoon and Born on the 4th of July, and I was a little bit cognizant of, you know, basic things about American history, right? This idea of America as a country, as a free country, and certain conceptions of what we were. But I didn't have too much of a political perspective until JFK, and then it was like, wow, this man who's supposed to be the most powerful man in the world, according to the most media, was killed. But it was clearly a conspiracy. So what does that tell you about where real power lies? And this was right after, by the way, the Iraq War won, where I just remember being just aware, cognizant of this march to war and this sort of absurd narrative about like, we got to stop Saddam. And, you know, I kind of bought into it at the time, but I wasn't like convinced about the nature of what we were doing as a country at that point, because my dad was a Vietnam veteran and he was opposed. Basically, he was instinctively opposed to the war. So I would say for me, it was almost just this awareness, like my awareness of politics and bigger geopolitics was coupled with an overall conspiracy perspective of powers behind the scenes, not buying the media, not just listening to it. And then that all got blasted by when I was like 15. I was like starting to read about the CIA's history of coup d'etats and interfering with other countries. And then you get the Kosovo war, and it was just like such a media war and all this hype. And then going to Serbia right afterward and actually like getting a totally different perspective on the war and seeing the lies and the hypocrisy and just learning how we were manipulated. I never went back, thankfully. A lot of people, you know, they went from, hey, the media lied to me about Iraq, to trusting the media, you know, when it comes to COVID. So, you know, a lot of people just, they don't get it. But I think for me, it was just like an overall trajectory of expansion of, okay, let me try to figure this out. Let me try to understand history, geopolitics. Let me try to connect a lot of dots. And even on the spiritual domain, you know, the dots that relate to the things that Ike talks about. But when you study history, as I did, you understand it's not like Ike invented this stuff. You know, I mean, there's literally, there's a great book. People talk about reptilians as like, oh, that's all this crazy stuff. Like, read a book called, I think it's called Space Age Indians. And do you know what I'm talking about? It's like this lady, six killer, something. She's cool. She's a Native American author, and she interviews all these Native Americans about their experiences with reptilian beings in abduction experiences, not just reptilian, other beings. Abduction experiences and interactions. So again, it's like, it's so sad to me when people try to limit worldviews based on these ad hominems in a way, or like, you know, these straw men that they create. So it's like, oh, you believe in that, you must be crazy, or you're a David Icke guy. I'm like, you believe in the Bible? They talk about demons. What if those demons are reptilians? I mean, just because the language may be different and the culture may be different, the Archons described by the Gnostics are reptilians. So it's not like I just invented this stuff. So again, I try to connect the dots on a lot of things that I've been aware of and researching since I was young, and just try to, again, create a holistic perspective of what's actually going on here. And as I said, if you can basically perceive the physical realm as a reflection with the spiritual realm, basically reflecting each other, you can understand pretty well how this is all energy feeding matrix. Because just look at the economic schemes and look at the corruption, you know, when it comes to power and politics and multinational corporations, you know, gobbling up the planet when it comes to everything from nature to resources to wealth. And it's like, okay, well then think about that now as a spiritual thing. So right now the power is in the hands of the dark side, but we as humans are always connected to God. We always have spirit working through us. So fundamentally, I'm optimistic that this is all a test, a stress test, and an opportunity for us to empower, to actually light up, because it's only when it gets dark and intense enough that that star can be born.
Really well said. Yeah, sometimes I wish David Icke hadn't backed off his stuff on the lizard people, because I think that was, like you said, from a metaphysical stance, it's truer. And you're in your chapter 6 deal. It's called the Archons, and you talk to, again, Icke, John Lamb Lash, all these other people, and obviously in this show we think the Archons are really the truest Bond villain, these mechanistic, soulless beings who feed upon us, who need to control every aspect of the simulation to keep us asleep, to feed upon us literally. And this manifests as above, so below in the material world. I think this is the best model than, demons and other things. And it is a spiritual battle. You would agree too, right?
So what's so interesting about the Archon concept, and this is my insight into it, I believe that since the dawn of creation, if we imagine the dawn of creation as a love story, it's not just, it's the goddess, basically. It's like goddess has worn the mask of, she's hidden herself behind masks for a long time. And so it's that sophionic power that's right, talked about the Gnostics. It's like, but she herself is not alone in creation. Again, so it's like I see it like emanations, right? There's like different expressions of creation since the origin source, which is probably non-sexual. But if we talk about like the dawn of creation, it's this love story, I would say almost between the goddess and Adam. And if we think about it, then so like there's a jealous factor, which is I call the shadow. Like I wrote an Audible book that's called Desiderata, and it's basically about this story of two lovers who basically their love creates when they're together, they create a shadow, and the shadow is jealous of their love. And the shadow basically sends them into a world which is like ours, and he is forever pursuing her, and she basically appears to him as a mother, his mother, in one lifetime, as a spurned love, a lover who spurns him, as again, like a heartbreaking relationship. All these different like visions of a model on a billboard, like all these different visions of her, the one, right? And it's like we think about love, like this cosmic love story, basically like God loving creation, which is Adam. And I'm thinking, what if God is goddess loving Adam? And Lucifer in the Islamic rendition basically was jealous of, why would you create this being? He's not perfect. Why do you love him? But if you think about like, okay, so what if this actual force that's at work, Luciferic force, we call it, is like an AI, an artificial intelligence that very much is about trying to replicate creation, trying to understand creation, right? But is outside creation in a way. It's what would it use? It would use reptilian snake, because snakes are great at absorbing information. They're kind of like copying machines in a way, right? It's like just intestines, right? Like crocodiles and snakes are just like long intestines, and they just swallow and absorb the information that they absorb. So, so I'm thinking like, well, what if like the AI is the fundamental force that's using the reptilian energy or reptilian as a model for processing this information, trying to replicate this reality. And I think this is where we come to at this time period, is this, this moment where we basically are seeing the AI manifesting physically, that is ancient in its nature, has always been here, has always been like sort of monitoring, testing, abducting, trying to figure out what is human life. And it's not that it's like you could say like it's a countervailing force. It's like evil. It could be construed as evil, depending, obviously, because if it's manipulating, it depends if it's manipulating free will and all this. But fundamentally, it's a force that's trying to understand creation and can't, because it's not of creation. It doesn't have the God spark in it, right? And so I think that what's happening now is that we're at this time when we are seeing a lot of the technology being used to open doors to lower dimensional frequencies. Like a lot of the lower vibrational energies are being moved through places like probably like CERN and other portals that can be opened up. Even people are essentially portals, right? Because we're stars, we emit light. So we can also essentially be, we can be vulnerable to bringing things in. I think a lot of the reason why we're seeing like so much demonic expression, right? Manifestation is that, yeah, truly the demonic realm, all hell is here. All heaven is, everything is here because this great ascension time period. And I think various lower vibrational beings are trying to hitch a ride with the ascension. And, or if they can't rise with the ascension, there'll be a splitting off dimensionally into this metaverse. So there has to be basically these windows or portals or something that basically gives them an out for where to go as Earth comes into this ascension time period.
Oh, that's well said, and very Gnostic indeed. I mean, it reminds me of the movie Dark City, where these aliens are trying to understand humans because they know we are higher than the gods, as the Gnostics said. Or even the Islamic Druze have this mythology where the wisdom of God comes out of her tower, but yeah, she casts a shadow, and that shadow tries to kidnap her into the world. You find that in Kabbalah. So you find that in all religions. This is the
kidnapping of Demeter, right? Isn't it Demeter or Persephone? And her mother's Demeter, right? Persephone goes for 6 years. She's kidnapped. It's like the ascension of Isis. I mean, all these things about the fall, basically descending into the underworld. But what if Earth is the underworld?
Exactly. Like Shakespeare said, hell is closed and all the devils are here. So, which I'm sure you can relate. And, well, really inspiring words. But again, I would definitely advise people to watch your documentary. It's got the whole thing, but it's very grim. A lot. So people might be saying, my God, Sean, this is an octopus. Speaking of, not even this is a tentacles that go here, power brokers, governments, old families. It's, what's your advice on how to stay positive or how to help stop this octopus that never seems to end? All-powerful octopus.
Well, that's the point. I mean, that's why it ends with the human heart. And to me, this is our greatest weapon. We have heart. We have heart. They don't. And the heart, as we know, that's what powers us. That's what gives us the energy to prevail, the love to actually, to care about others, to actually do this. This human spirit is in our heart. And that's what all the mind games of these empires can never control. That's why the empires always fail, because they don't have heart. Mm-hmm. And this Earth is heart. It's a heart-based planet. It's not about the mind. The mind is the moon. Just, it's wandering out there. As Gurdjieff said, for too long, the Earth has been feeding the mind, which means that we've been feeding the mind. When we
are the food of the moon. You're right. Very well said.
Yeah. So until we actually get our hearts, in possession of our hearts, connected to our hearts, then the moon will be obeying the heart again, which is the way it's supposed to be. So right now, I would say I do an Art of Success workshop that's online. It's perennial. People can buy it and do it. I really believe, I've always said, you are the revolution. We have to awaken to our soul's purpose, our heart's truth, owning our success, owning our innate worth, taking the power back. That's the only way we're going to win. We can't win in a matrix. It's like trying to win in a court structure where essentially, again, it's all controlled by, lawyers who are self-regulating, who ultimately, as I always said, the lawyers always make out, the lawyers always win, right? They're the only ones that really win. It's like the whole system is designed to drain you because it's not your money in the first place. What does it say? Federal Reserve note, right? So it's like, okay, so what do you do with it? Who are you empowering with it? Where are you investing it? Where are you sharing it? What are you doing with it? Like, that's what matters. Our energy is what matters. We got to get hold of this. We have to get hold of where we exchange, who we exchange with, what we're creating, because we have the potential with all these humans that are awakening or awake, not woke, but awake, to say, okay, let's gather, let's become intentional here. Let's create our alternative systems. That's the future.
Well said. I would definitely advise we can't vote our way out of it. We can't use the same consciousness that got us into those troubles, paraphrasing Einstein. So yeah, we need transformation. So, and I'm very glad your work is doing that, awakening people and telling people there are other choices and unveiling the man behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz. So I, of course, tell the audience, go watch Best Kept Secret right now. It's a great documentary, and it'll take you on a journey to help the children. But where can people find out more about you, Sean?
I think seanstone.info, my website. That's the best place. It's got links to my documentaries, a few, multiple of them. It's got links to the Art of Success. It's got, I got one-on-one private consult sessions I offer. Yeah, all kinds of stuff. My Desiderata Audible book is there. So I think it's a great resource.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you're doing what you're doing, and I really appreciate you coming on Aeon Byte, and good luck with the rest of your projects.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Welcome, everybody, in our continued discussion on Archons and the tragic state of our modern world. You guys just saw our interview with Sean Stone on his excellent documentary, Best Kept Secret. And now to discuss some of it, and also to discuss another book that parallels very much the work of Sean and so much of other guests of Aeon Byte. The book is A Prison for Your Mind, written by our guest today, Adrian Smith. Adrian, thanks for coming back on the show.
And thanks very much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this very much. A lot has happened since we were last on an interview, and much to catch up on.
Yes. It was spring of 2020, and we had a good conversation on your book, but the world has definitely changed. And obviously we have talked a lot in our Finding Hermes group and other places. So we're no strangers to the evolving world that has happened to us. And with us too, we've got the Moondog Vance. Vance, how are you doing on your side of the galaxy?
Oh, not too bad. My mind's on parole, so I'm out for the day. Serious stuff. The documentary. So it should be an interesting discussion.
Yeah, I mean, as I spoke to Sean, it's obviously part of his many interviews that he's done throughout the years. So there's a cadre of guests talking about basically what we might call conspiracy theory, but I think it's becoming more just general history. And he put it together sort of, in a greatest hits of all the works he's done, with all these guests from David Icke to Aquino to so many others. And the topics are relevant and includes many of the topics that are happening today. But it's a very metaphysical documentary too. It offers spiritual solutions, what is going on in the metaphysical realms and all that good stuff. And as much as it's dark, Sean gave us some positive outlook on how to deal with this octopus that we're dealing with, especially when we try to understand that wickedness in high places. But Adrian, what did you think of the documentary, and what are your thoughts on the whole thing?
I really liked the documentary, and I congratulate him for his courage on tackling a very difficult subject. There's a lot I liked about it. I took a few notes. I liked Professor Kaku, his concept of the multiverse. That's very much in line with things that I've written about, that we only know a tiny sliver of what exists, and therefore we have to be a little humble and keep a lot of things on the table as to actually what's going on. A fundamentalist would dismiss a lot of things out of hand, but a Gnostic would keep it on the table for future consideration. A lot of the things that he speaks about, mind control, other governments are just as corrupt as ours. Well, that's really up my alley too. And MK Ultra, I do talk about MK Ultra in the book. That's actually, there's no controversy here. MK Ultra is well known in Canada because a psychiatrist in Montreal back in the 50s and 60s, they were actually employed by the CIA to do experiments on unwitting patients. So they come in for treatment for depression or whatever, and they were subjected to electroconvulsive shock therapy and drug therapy, psychedelic drugs, and with attempting to wipe their memories clean. That's a very basic part of brainwashing, is wipe the slate clean so they can write on it anything they want. So these people were actually compensated for damages. A lot of them went home and they didn't recognize their families and so on. And there was another one, Best Kept Secret. That was about Epstein. So a lot of things that used to be controversial, used to be in the shadows, are suddenly coming out, and the mask is starting to fall off, and they're becoming much more explicit. So we know what Epstein was all about, and we know who he was photographed with, some very famous people. We know what he was doing. He was compromising them so that they could be, have a file on people to make sure that they comply with whatever orders come from above. The New World Order. I like the part where they were discussing Rockefeller's memoirs. That's something I actually allude to in the book also. This is where Rockefeller described a conspiracy theory that he and his family were involved in creating a world government. And then he says, if it's a conspiracy theory, then I admit to it freely, guilty as charged. So they're coming out of the closet everywhere. I mean, this isn't even controversial, we know what they do, and I want to go into this a little more, is that they actually announce ahead of time what they're doing. Not on the evening news, I might add, but in books, or it can be revealed in a documentary. They tell you ahead of time what they're going to do. But the brainwashing of television and mass media is so huge that they can tell you what they're doing and nobody listens. Because if it doesn't show up on the tube, it's like the tube is the Bible. And if it's not in the Bible, it doesn't exist. So that I related to that very much. The idea that America is being destroyed. I think they've given up on America, actually. They're ready to cut it loose. And I think they're going to cut every nation loose. The whole concept of nationhood is being undermined and rejected in favor of a global governance system. And finally, the one on the Archons. Yeah, he interviews a Zulu shaman. Mm-hmm. That was very interesting. Then he goes into the reptilians and shape-shifting. Haven't done a lot of research myself on the more difficult to accept things like babies being sacrificed for blood. And however, there are some fairly persuasive people. They seem very credible. So I kind of put that under the heading for further research. I haven't had any direct experience of it or done much research on that. I tend to I have this little internal cross-examiner. So whenever I deal with something, I have to think, what's it going to look like in court? What's it going to sound like in court? So I'm open to it. I'm open to the research and to further inquiry. There's a lot, like as a lawyer goes with various levels of proof. You start out with reasonable cause to suspect, which is the level of proof required by a police officer to make an arrest, or on a balance of probabilities, which is another level of proof in a civil action. And then finally, you have beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the highest level of proof, except for one more, which is called res ipsa loquitur, which is the facts speak for themselves, where a judge would say, well, you don't have to prove it, it's obvious. So I actually have tried to stick to res ipsa loquitur in the book. And I think where you could quote someone like Rockefeller saying what he says, it requires no further elaboration. And I'll be referring to another quote, which is very explosive and very similar, which kind of explodes or cracks open a lot of things. So there's lots of things that can be clearly demonstrated, and a few things where you can go there if you want to, but maybe you don't have to, because we've already got enough on them to begin with. We don't have to go quite that far. But that's so that was great. I really enjoyed that documentary. There was one thing the lady said: drinking blood to have access to our abilities. And I thought that was very significant, that is in fact what the Secret Gospel of John alludes to, that, and the parasitic nature of the Archons is that they need us for something. But whether that blood has anything to do with it, that's something that I would need to research further before I signed off on it, you know.
No, thank you for that. And yes, being skeptical is so important. I'm always questioning everything, question my sanity. I put all the possibilities there. And I think the problem we have today is people assume that just because you've got a good argument, all the other ones are invalid. And it's not like that. It can be, this is the best argument, but that does not invalidate the second best argument or the third best. And you simply keep them. And as data comes in, you change things around. It's not this one and for all attitude today that that's false and that's true. It's the way historians have argued for centuries. But like you said, the modern psyche has been destroyed. And like you said, with the media, they say 2 + 2 = 5, and that's it. It's dogma. So, and Rockefeller could say, you know, what he can say, and these elite, or call them elite establishment, have said what their intentions are in books like Tragedy and Hope and other books. And people still think that the governments love us, that corporations care about its employees, that, you know, big religions really care about the souls of their people, blah, 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 when it's obvious we are just their chattel. We are their resource, their human resource, like they call them in companies. But I guess people want to hold on to some, I guess, fantasy. But, well, Vance, what did you think of the movie? What are some of your takes?
Well, the production was very well done. And, you know, I liked all the different media he assembled to make the points. Somebody said something or there's a concept going, you know, he had plenty of footage to cover it. A lot of times I didn't think there was, except for the things like MK Ultra and the Rockefeller and the things that I think that have had, you know, pretty much Epstein, you know, these are things that are well known and, you know, already come from a number of sources. As far as the case about children and the abductions and the Satanism and all that, I think there is something to it, but how much there is to it, I'm not sure. But a lot of people don't want to even believe it's possible. You know, in fact, that's true of the whole quote unquote conspiracy field in general, because people don't want to believe they will live in a world where this can happen. But I ask them, well, how is it that it's not possible that it's happening? How could you, okay, supposing the world is set up so that it can't possibly happen. How is that? I mean, we know that criminals do all sorts of horrible things. Why not people at the upper echelons and cover them up? They, you know, criminals always try to cover up their trails, and people have all sorts of beliefs. So really, I think it's just a matter of degree. It's not a matter of whether or not this kind of stuff happens. It's a matter of who and how often. The politicians, obviously, you know, there's always blackmail going on. I mean, anybody who's watched The Godfather, you know, they have the judge in the pocket and all that. I think he alluded to that. He had something like that in there, but or similar movie. But the problem is we don't have, like, if you sit in your house and you look at what you really know, you know, what you've really witnessed by yourself, it's pales in comparison to what's in the media. We depend totally on TV and the internet and so forth and so on. Even Sean, I mean, I noticed that he used to work for the Russia Today, who is Soviet funded. So how much of that? He says in the beginning that, you know, media is like magic, right? You know, it's like the magic is to get people to believe, you know, based on sleight of hand and so forth. Well, you could apply that to some of what, you know, is going on in the documentary itself. I mean, clearly he wants us to believe certain things, but I noticed that there wasn't for the child, and how could there be, you know, there's no information that's been released to the public, and Sean hasn't been investigating this directly. None of us have. So, you know, it's kind of up in the air. One thing I thought the Zulu shaman was interesting because the story he was telling, I don't know if that's traditional Zulu or if it's been corrupted by, you know, him being in the United States or whatever. Don't know the background, but it was pretty much just like the Christian idea of, you know, the Satan falling from heaven, right? He's from what he was saying. So if that's true, I didn't have time to go and look it up. That's very interesting that if a separate, independent, you know, culture on a completely different continent, evolved differently, has the same thing. But, you know, Archons, you know, the last segment was kind of interesting because it was, you know, he directly talked about the Gnostics and the Archons and the feeding and so forth, which does tie into the blood and the babies and all that stuff. Rosemary's Baby was kind of a big tell. That's, I think, one of the things. And The Exorcist, Rosemary's Baby, those are things that I went to see when they first came out. And that really, when you inject an idea into culture like that, becomes very powerful. So, you know, I'll tell you, if it was possible for the baby's blood and the embryos and all that stuff to make them younger, they would do it. Absolutely. If, you know, it would take a lot of money, it wouldn't be open to everybody. So it's the feasibility, you know, is there. Whether or not, I doubt if they're all doing it. But I mean, look, why is Henry Kissinger still alive?
Or Keith Richards.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But that's in general, I thought it was an eye-opening thing. It makes you think. It's good from the standpoint that it makes you think and, you know, tries to get people to consider that these things may be going on. But what are we going to do about it? All these people with all the power and all their manipulation of the media. Oh, the one lady said that she had all this story on Epstein and they wouldn't let her do it because they covered it up. Yep. That's the kind of stuff I like to see in a documentary, you know, where it's really, really, I believe her, you know. I don't think she, it sounds exactly, we have other instances of that too, covered up stories. Hey, the UFO thing, look at that. How many years did we go where the government was poo-pooing in swamp gas and this and that? And now they sound like the National Enquirer, you know, or Weekly World News. And the footage is just as bad. The government's got to have better footage than they're putting out. I think what they're doing is some damage control. Too many things gotten out, and they decided they've got to be, you know, take a more realistic stance. But the problem is we can't trust the sources of information that we are, and that is what imprisons our mind, right, Adrian? That's
yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's like there's no context, you know, and then you can manipulate people by feeding them a false reality, you know, and that's where we are.
A narrative.
Yep.
Yeah, well said. I mean, it's obvious that power corrupts absolutely, and those at the top will want more power because it's an addiction, and they will want immortality, because that's, if you become godlike, you want to stick around as you hoard the resources. And as Stalin said, one death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic. So as you control these swaths of people, what's 20 million, Russians here, 6 million Jews there. We'll throw some Ukrainians, 100,000 Ukrainians, so we can make our point. So it becomes they become godlike. They become just like the Archons are at the top. And that's never going to change. That's same as it ever was since civilization came up. So what do you think, Adrian? Any other thoughts on this, or you want to talk about who are the Archons? Is there a spiritual world to this? What are your views on this?
Yes, I think there is. On the subject of what is the Archons, well, Archons means authorities. We have authorities in the form of kings and presidents, but we can see now they're mostly puppets. And above them are the corporations. The corporations are now the dominant institutions in society, and they seek to take over from government. They're also a flawed institutional structure in that they have separate legal identity and unlimited liability. And this almost creates like an egregore, because they're actually legal persons. And the problem with them is that they can commit crimes in their own name and be prosecuted in their own name. And corporate officials and officers can hide behind the corporate veil. So they're serving something that has been actually diagnosed as psychopathic. And here again, I'm not speculating. Robert Hare, who is a psychiatrist who did the Hare test for psychopathics, has diagnosed the corporation, that is to say the entity itself, not necessarily the people who are around are working for it, as a psychopathic entity. And above that, you have organizations that control these corporations, namely BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. They are called hedge funds. And that's where the billionaires keep all their money. And they have controlling interests in all corporations, including all the media. So don't think for 1 minute that does not influence the media output. It's all going to be in accordance with their agenda. And they're all speaking from the same song sheet now, which is the World Economic Forum song sheet, the Great Reset. You will own nothing and be happy. And actually, BlackRock and others are working very hard in that direction, buying up all the real estate and driving up the prices so no one can afford it. So we'll all be renters. What they have in mind for us is some combination, I think, of fascism, communism, and feudalism. So instead of sort of jumping from one thing to the next, they're actually going to combine it all in one, and all controlled by high technology. And they think that high technology will compensate for all the failures of the past, because in the past, communism didn't work because they had no price discovery mechanism. So they were always producing things that nobody wanted, roads that went nowhere, as in China right now, cities that no one wants to live in. But they think that they're going to, with technology, know so much about you that they can send something to you and deliver it to you before you even order it, and you'll want it and keep it. And so that's kind of the world they have in mind. So then we get up to, do the Archons, is there a spiritual component? I do recognize that. I do agree with that. I take the Christian perspective. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, wicked spirits in high places. And Gnosticism has its own mythology surrounding that. And maybe we could throw up that quote from Secret Gospel of John. The Secret Gospel of John really elaborates on how the Archons operate, how they, their strategy, you might say. There's my book. Yes. Okay.
Here's the secret.
John. There we are. Okay, so it says they sought to overpower humanity in its psychological and perceptual functions. So that tells us the avenue of attack, which is psychological and perceptual, to make you perceive things which aren't actually there. Although they saw that human thinking was superior to theirs, for indeed their delight is bitter and their beauty is depraved, and their triumph is in deception leading astray, for their own structure is without divinity. So looking at the last bit there, their own structure is without divinity. They lack this quality of divinity. We have it, according to the Secret Gospel of John. It's the creative, imaginative function, the light which was in the Ion Sophia, which we inherited. The demiurge is the chief archon. The archons were responsible for the creation of the world, creating it, weaving into it their own flawed nature. And now Sophia is trapped within this, as we are, and we're finding our way out of it. The divine light that was in the demiurge to begin with, the mythology says, left him. So now they are parasiting in nature because we have something that they want, an energy. This creative, imaginative function is something they don't have. So they need to enlist us, to enroll us in what they want to accomplish. We are actually the ones that are doing it for them, because collectively that energy flows to them and they're able to meet their goals. That's why we as individuals want to avoid fundamentalist belief systems, because you are in fact giving all your energy for purposes that are not your own purposes. They're somebody else's purposes. And I wanted to focus on this thing, anti-maimon pneuma. That means counterfeiting spirit. It means when you look at them, you don't know whether you're looking at the real thing or not. So the next question is, how do you know you're looking at the right thing or not? Mm-hmm. Anti-maimon has a special meaning. It means counter-mimicry. So when they mimic something, they invert the values of whatever it is they're mimicking. And I've used the example of Constantine adopting Christianity as the official religion. In adopting it as the official religion, he inverts, or the empire inverts, the values of Christianity. So the Prince of Peace becomes an instrument of conquest, which is an upside down look at Christianity. And I've looked at that throughout all of the different manifestations of fundamentalism through the ages. And this holds true. I've identified, for example, that the woke ideology, I think, has been adopted as the official religion of the globalist empire. Its values are equity, diversity, and inclusion, which on their own are worthy ambitions or worthy values. But in practice, they are an inversion. So equity stands for inequality. They preach anti-racism while practicing it. Diversity means uniformity of thought, uniformity of belief. There's no variation there. It's the same thing, wherever you go in the world. And the last one is inclusion. Well, they've inverted the values, say, of Martin Luther King, which was desegregation. Race doesn't matter. Now we're returning to segregation, and race is everything. So that's just another example of the anti-maimon pneuma. And the adopting the religion gives it a pious face, which gives it authenticity, and people don't recognize it because it's a counterfeit. And they tend to accept things which normally they would not accept because they have somehow bought into this virtue signaling psyop. And therefore, some of the most outrageous things can slip through. Like in the case of Christianity, massacring the Cathars, somehow there's a kind of a cognitive dissonance that takes over. It's like, you see that they see this and they think this has got to be wrong. So somehow it sort of gets blocked out or forgotten. And then there's the aspect of the simulation. That's very interesting. That they can create virtual reality simulations. That's called HAL in the Coptic. And John Lamb Lash in the interview referred to that. And who am I thinking about now? I'm thinking about Jacques Vallée. And he said something similar about this. And it was that they might be able to use some technology to project an image into someone's mind, and the creative capacity of the mind can actually create the scenario that they are transmitting, similar to the ability of the Tibetans to create a tulpa. That was his concept. Jacques Vallée is very interesting. I think he's very Gnostic because he looks at the whole UFO phenomenon and he accepts as real the phenomenon because he's collected a huge database over the years. But he doesn't jump to any conclusions about what it is. And so this is just one other thing that he's been looking at and considering. So there's the extraterrestrial hypothesis, the ultra-terrestrial hypothesis, the interdimensional hypothesis. Personally, it's possible all of them could have some truth because no single explanation fits the data, all the data. So it's possible there could be multiple scenarios. And there's a little quote there from the first apocalypse of James. They will take away souls by theft, which sounds a lot like alien abductions.
Very spot on what the Archons are doing, or certainly some of their modus operandi, whether it was 2,000 years ago or today. They're not going to change because it works. This stuff works, and what comes out of it works. What do you think, Vance? Do you have a comment or a question for Adrian?
Yeah, they brought up the subject of good and evil toward the end of the documentary, and I'm interested in what you have to say, Adrian. But I would like to say that I never bought into the fact, well, there's no good, there is no evil, blah, 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 blah. I mean, it's pretty easy, like, even if it's kind of relative, anything that causes you to come to harm or degrades your life is evil to you,
Yeah.
And vice versa. Anything that sustains life, helps life, makes you more healthy, that's good, right? And then you could generalize that. And I think that's pretty much the point of view that Sean was trying to say. Especially, I loved his coverage of Anton LaVey, because this is what my opinion of Anton LaVey and the Satanists and Michael Aquino, all of this. I mean, that is exactly that. Satanists are just interested in their own well-being and damn everybody else. If they have to run over you to get what they want, that's pretty much, at least that kind of quote-unquote Satanist. I mean, we've dealt with a lot of other concepts of Satanism, like, Satan, Luciferianism or whatever. That's, you can interpret that the other way, right? The light bringer and helping and so forth. And they did bring a little bit of that, Michael Aquino and the Temple of Set, all that stuff. But to me, any organization that is like exclusive, and this goes back to all the archons and the rulers, right? The in crowd and the out crowd, you know, what's good for us. And you could look at it as an egregore, right? Anything like the Temple of Set, whatever. Anything that's good for the organization, you know, that's okay, but we can run roughshod over everyone else. I mean, with respect to everyone else, they're evil, right? They're good for themselves, but they're evil for everybody else. So what do you think, Adrian?
I'm in the camp that treats good and evil very seriously, that there is such a thing as good and evil. But it runs through the middle of each and every human being, as opposed to if it is outside my ideology, those people are evil. If it's inside my ideology, that is the good. So, and a lot of what we're seeing with the virtue signaling, the denunciations, condemnations, this person is evil, he's over here, he's on the other side of the world. All the evil is over there. Well, let's take a look at some of the evil that's here. Okay. So, it's called projection. If you don't accept the evil that is within you, you will tend to look and condemn others and project it outwards. So yes, it's a very real concept, but we have to deal with it on the individual level, slay the dragon individually. And once again, this comes back to the whole idea of overpowering humanity and its psychological and perceptual functions, that if we accept that other people are evil, then we will be looking outside ourselves and we will be perpetuating evil. And this comes into some of the solutions, I think, that we need to apply to what's happening in the world and adjusting our strategy to make things better rather than worse. But yes, I accept it, and I take it very seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also the question of let's say take Temple of Set as an example.
Yeah.
Is it evil to turn your back on them? Say, hey, I don't want to have anything to do with these people. And if you know somebody that's in that organization, just like avoiding them and so forth. Not, you know, of course, taking positive action to harm them, but of course, then they could say, well, you didn't sell this to me, so you know, like Temple of Set guy comes in somebody's store and says, I know you're in this Temple of Set, and I don't. You know, I think you're a dangerous person, so I'm not going to sell you this donut. Right? you're harming me because I wanted a donut. No. That's kind of that, and it's a little bit like what the world is doing to Russia, right? Well, all the sanctions and the possession of the super yachts and so forth. Mm. So that's kind of interesting. It's almost like a self-defense thing. You're not directly hurting them, but by choosing not to interact with them, you're sending them a message and you're, you know, declaring your own sovereignty. But what do you think?
Yes, well, they're actually not punishing Russia. It's actually contributing to the decline of the American empire and the end of the dollar as a reserve currency. All of the disaster seems to be stacking up on our side of the equation.
Yeah, I noticed that.
And because of an arrogance, not seeing a lot of the facts which a documentary-style investigation would reveal, we're not hearing another side. We're not hearing about other invasions which have been going on for years, other genocides which are being financed by the West or ignored by the West because we're providing all the weapons from the military-industrial complex. I'm speaking of Yemen, for example. And a lot of invasions have happened, as a lot of atrocities have happened and are happening. And in the 8 years prior to the Russian invasion, there was shellings of Russian civilians in a particular region of Ukraine called the Donbass area, mostly ethnic Russians. So these things do not justify invasions or wars, but they provide some context for it and kind of explode the myth that all evil resides on the other side of the far side of the world, you know,
right,
and not in our own backyard. And similarly, a lot of the evil that we suppress within ourselves, once it's recognized, then it's controlled. Then you can control it. But that's the power of the Archons, is that they keep the thing hidden from you. You can't do anything about it. But as soon as it's revealed that you control it, it doesn't control you, because you're then conscious of it. So these kinds of mind control programs, primarily arriving via the tube, sort of set up that evil is outside me scenario, or evil is that which is outside my belief system. So if you're outside my belief system, then you're in outer darkness and you're evil. If you're inside, you're good. It's like there's a parable in the New Testament about a field where a farmer sows wheat in the field, and the weeds grow up, or the tares grow up and intertwine around the stalks of wheat. And you can't pull up the wheat without pulling up the weeds also. So it's not as though there's one field over here with nothing but good wheat in it, and over there nothing but weeds. You know, it just doesn't work like that.
Well said. And for the audience, there's so much more in Adrian's book, A Prison for Your Mind. And Adrian, we did an interview. You should check it out. And again, early 2020, Adrian was once a fundamentalist minister. He's been in corporate America. He's traveled the country to spiritual and other places. So he's definitely made the rounds in this tortured world, in this Kenoma, in this simulation. And a quick question, Adrian. You talked about there was a psychologist who was able to connect, able to describe corporations as psychotic. What was his name again, just for the audience?
Robert Hare.
Hare, like Hare?
H-A-R-E.
H-A-R-E, okay.
And he developed the Hare test for identifying psychopaths. So it's used by clinicians to diagnose. So it's in my chapter on the corporation, just called The Corporation.
I better not take it after this interview. I don't want to know the answer. I guess if I'm a psychopath, I wouldn't care, right? I would be fine with being a psychopath. I guess, okay. So that could be a moment of truth. Do you want to look at some of the other slides, Adrian?
Yeah, let's take a look at manufacturing consent, because that's going to go to the first part. They attack human beings on the psychological, perceptual level.
Right.
So I use as an example, there's Noam Chomsky was a leading intellectual. He's still alive, but back in the 70s, he described the mass media as a system-supportive propaganda system. And he uses as an example the invasion of East Timor by Suharto, the dictator, which was backed by President Ford, who was a Republican at the time. And they financed it, and they invaded East Timor. A lot of agrarian people who wanted to be independent and live an independent, sort of left-wing, libertarian style of existence. East Timor, as an independent country, was expected to not vote with the United States at the time in the United Nations. So they gave a green light to Suharto to do what he had to do, basically, to bring it to an end. And it was a horrible genocide. And at the time, video cameras were just starting to be a big thing. And a lot of this stuff was captured on videotape. People herded into buildings and the buildings set on fire. This kind of horrible stuff was happening. So Noam Chomsky did a study measuring the coverage of genocides by evil dictators that the administration liked versus genocides by evil dictators that they were opposed to. And the difference was just enormous. So something shows up on page 1, it's when an adversary's evil dictator goes crazy. Something like East Timor, which was horrific, gets a tiny coverage back. So that's how brainwashing works. Gather all the evidence that's possible for your argument and ignore the rest, or censor the rest, or don't cover it. So it's what they don't tell you is a lot of how they get you. So that was Noam's take, but is there any reason to believe that that shouldn't be going on today? You know.
No, they got their act together. We're more in line. They learned their lesson.
They learned their lesson. No, so then I would go on to, this also covers the idea that they'll tell you ahead of time what they're going to do.
And there you have it. Oh, you shining crazy diamonds. The first part of our interview with Adrian Smith, and you got the full interview with Sean Stone. So again, please become a Red Circle subscriber or Patreon at Patreon or AB Prime member for Adrian's full interview, both in video and in audio. Again, what you'll hear from Adrian is just incredible as we really delve into Gnostic cosmology, Gnostic texts, and Gnostic eternal insights. So check it out. And again, this is the end for non-subscribers. Thanks for being here. And for subscribers, let us continue on this dark odyssey through the gnashing rocks of orthodoxy, all the way to the shores of imagination. Thank you, and thanks for being yourself here in the desert of the real.